Hello everyone, it is Monday, October the 8th, 2018, about 11:45 in the afternoon, and we are in Ohio. We are going into, you're better with this, what are the details? What's the long version of the name of this place?
This is the National Museum of the United States Air Force.
National Museum of the United States Air Force. I just think of it as an aerospace museum owned by the Air Force. The X-45A, completely unmanned jet fighter. So this one, Wicked Wanda, it really does look like something you would see on that movie Stealth. Completely unmanned. It's flown remotely, and it can deliver payloads, missiles, and all kinds of stuff. And because there is no human inside with a circulatory system, no blood, no fluid on the brain, this plane can take turns and maneuvers that you could never do if there was a real human sitting in the cockpit. Okay, now we're getting to the more experimental section. This one right here was actually in competition with what later became the F-22 Hornet. This one would have been called the Black Widow if it had won, but he just lost out. And then there was some experiments done actually with the flying saucer shape. They never could quite get it to work, but they did try. It was just too unstable. They have to figure out anti-gravity before you can get a disc shape to actually work. And then we have the Valkyrie. Oh, the Valkyrie. Okay, this one is like the predecessor, the relative to the modern Harrier, made for trying to be able to do vertical takeoffs. It also was experimental and failed. I find it poetic that one of the few remaining SR-71s be parked in a hangar right below the Valkyrie, its biggest competition of all time. And while the SR-71 actually won out and went into production and use, the Valkyrie was a little bit faster, but it with those giant engines on there, it made it very visible to radar and kind of defeated its own purpose in that way. And also, in one of its maiden flights, one of the escort planes was sucked into the vortex of this engine and crashed. And I'm pretty sure the pilot actually bailed out. Let's see, bought 2, so there was 2 Valkyries made, even though its program was canceled. There was 2 that was bought, and one of them crashed in that accident in 1966. And it would appear as though this is the only one left, the only one left in existence, capable of traveling Mach 3, which, I mean, the SR-71 can go Mach 3 as well, but still, it's the Valkyrie. How cool is that? A few more experimental planes. This one was the first forward-swept wing design to travel supersonic, or faster than the speed of sound. And then there was this one right here, the Goblin, an onboard escort. Onboard escort for the B-36, so it could be dropped out the bottom and then fight off other airplanes. It obviously failed. We get to this area dedicated at least a little bit to the X program, which if you remember me talking about Chuck Yeager, flew the X-1 to be the first plane to go over the speed of sound. And then later the X program went on to the X1B, the Bell X1B, which has the same kind of bullet shape, but is starting to take on more of a hairier look to it. And then we have the X3 here, E75A. So this was a mid-engine plane. Again, the engine sat in the center of the plane, and this one had the counter-rotating propellers. Two propellers, one turning one way, one turning the other, to give it even more thrust. But even so, it was not able to go over 430 miles an hour. Props, even the most powerful and efficient, cannot reach even close to the speed of sound. Partly because the closer to the speed of sound you get, the more inefficient a prop becomes. You cannot do it without the use of a jet engine. And I thought, since we were back here, I'd go ahead and give you guys a shot of the back of the Valkyrie as well. You can see all 6 jet engines in a row, like cannons, ready to fire, propel that awesome looking airplane into the stratosphere. A B-2 stealth bomber here. These things were so experimental that when civilians were seeing them before they were known, they thought they were UFOs. And they were bombers, and they were successful. A lot of people thought that it was not a success because they were visible to the eye and therefore not truly stealthy, but they were invisible to radar, which was what counted. And they're still being used even now. We are now getting into the space exploration part of the museum, and if you guys remember my time going through the Saturn V building at the Huntsville Space Center a few weeks ago, you'll probably remember they had a singed command module there as well. And with all the times that we went to the moon, there's a few of these hanging around different museums. This one was the Apollo 15 command module. Singed on re-entry. Burn marks still there. I am floating in a tin can far above the world. It really does feel like you're in a tiny little soup can just looking at this thing from the outside. Definitely couldn't be claustrophobic and be an astronaut. And this, I believe, is a training shuttle that was once used to train astronauts. So, United States. This is America. It's definitely been very stripped down. Now that looks like a simulator there. Oh, okay, so there's the space bathroom. Once again, we have another bathroom. Looks a little more detailed than the one in Huntsville Space Center. That was the living quarters. In there, though. 7 to 8 people. Cramped in there. There's your sleeping area there. There he is. Eddie von Rickenbacker.
Vern.
I can highly recommend the biography. Or is it an autobiography?
It's one he wrote.
Yeah, so it'd be an autobiography of Eddie von Rickenbacker.
He was born in Ohio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Columbus,
yeah.
Ohio.
His parents were German immigrants, which made them suspect him a little bit at the beginning of his military career. They were suspicious of him, but he more than proved himself. This right here is the military-built stealth car. And it is so stealthy that it's almost, let's see, it's called the Vapor, and it runs almost silently, almost completely silently. And it's black, the doors tricked out to flip upwards, very science fiction looking controls, and steering wheels on the inside. I can't help but imagine that when the engineers were given this project, that they didn't say something like, yeah, stealth car, we're going to make ourselves a Batmobile. This looks like a cross between the Batmobile and Kit from Knight Rider. You can see the 180 degree or 360 degree camera mounted on the top there. Completely silent and stealthy military stealth car, the Vapor. We just got out of the museum, the giant 22-acre museum right over there. They're gracious enough to give us some picnic tables. So I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to bring this one to a close. This is probably going to be 2 or 3 parts, so I'm going to go ahead and say if it runs extra long, this will be the end of part 3. So please don't forget to smash that like button, leave comments and questions and suggestions. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon to start receiving notifications. And I will see you again in the next one.
Bye.